I don't know why he doesn't just get those things, those products. You just take Propecia and your hair grows back. Have you not got it over here? Yes.
Oh my God.
What's up, guys? Derek, moreplates.com. Today we're going to be talking about Justin Bieber and when he called out Prince William for his hair loss and not using finasteride, which sort of bit him in the ass, it seems, because this was 8 years ago now. In 2012, Justin Bieber slams Prince William's thinning hair.
I love you dearly for this, because this is maybe the greatest story ever. So Justin Bieber, causing an uproar across the pond, basically has this to say to Roller Coaster magazine about Prince William. I mean, there are things to prevent that nowadays, like Propecia. I don't know why he doesn't just get those things, those products. You just take Propecia and your hair grows back. Have you not got it over here? Yes.
Oh my God.
Thank you. Oh, there's nothing like Justin Bieber in the Batmobile with diplomacy. That's terrific. So, Rob, what do you have
This
here?
has caused an absolute scandal in Britain. Everybody's talking about this. He did this interview with a British magazine, and he talked about the one thing that Brits never, ever talk about, which is the future king's receded hair.
Right.
You could go to the Tower for less. It's a terrible, terrible mistake.
What is, if you don't mind my asking, what is the feeling about the receding hairline?
Well,
And you're safe here.
as I'm in America, I can say that I think people feel terrible for him. He started to lose his hair at just 25 years old. I spoke to this leading hair expert in London who told me there really is very little you can do. If you take this drug that Justin is prescribing, it might
Thank you,
stop
Dr. Bieber.
That's
It
right.
stops
It will
it.
stop the loss, but it won't grow back anything you've lost.
Jill, I would argue,
That's what a crown's
don't you
for.
just beat time? Don't you just take it in your own hands?
I don't think he needs to care about it. He is going to be the future king of England. Honestly. And, you know, I know many men who are bald and proud. And, Justin, don't throw stones at glass houses, because let's see where your hair is in 30 years from now.
Yeah, those words can come back to haunt you.
So obviously that comment didn't age too well for Justin, because he, in fact, 8 years later is now experiencing his own significant progression of androgenic alopecia. Obviously, it's not as simple as, why don't you just take finasteride and it fixes it? Finasteride can only inhibit upwards of 70% of your systemic DHT and a lesser amount of your scalp DHT levels. And that's even at a 5 milligram dose that's used for benign prostatic hyperplasia, not even the dose being prescribed for actual androgenic alopecia. If you've seen any of my other content as well, you'll know that DHT is not the only cause of hair loss. There are other androgens circulating in the body that are endogenously produced that also transcribe the same kind of effects, just to a lesser degree androgenicity wise based on their tissue selectivity. So things with different binding affinities, you have other androgens being produced as precursors to DHT, metabolites of other hormones, all with their own level of anabolic to androgenic activity, which will bind and activate androgen receptors and transcribe the same cascade of events that occurs from DHT, just to a lesser effect. And that's why lots of guys will take finasteride, dutasteride, wipe out a lot of their DHT and still have progression of hair loss. It's not something that's going to be a end-all be-all for everyone, and in fact, for most, it'll eventually catch up with them. Even if they're inhibiting DHT, they'll just be able to stave it off for quite a bit longer. So the guy basically says there's nothing you can do about it, and finasteride will only prevent it. It won't regrow hair. That's somewhat accurate, I suppose, but as far as like there's nothing you can do about it, that's obviously not true. As far as it preventing further loss, yeah, you're basically putting in like a big blockade to halt it, but it's not going to be sufficient enough to completely stave it off. That's just the only way you're going to achieve that, is by achieving a hormone profile either more conducive to not androgen dominance, bioavailable androgen dominance, or competing with endogenous androgens or exogenous androgens for androgen receptor activation locally up here. Or there's a myriad of other things you can do, as well as different therapeutic agents that have potential in the further downstream cascade of events that actually leads to the miniaturization itself. But those are much less promising than dealing with the root of the issue that we are aware is the problem to begin with, which is androgen receptor activation. So at the end of the day, what can you take away from this situation is no one is safe, including Justin, clearly. So this guy is really far gone now, and even I would assume he's been on finasteride because he's known about it since 2012 when he was like a teenager. So obviously he knows what it is and was well aware of it even when he had what, you know, most would perceive as a perfect hairline with good density, even though his dad, I believe, is bald. So obviously you would anticipate with balding in your family that you're probably going to get hit too. So it would be prudent to start your hair loss prevention regimen at an earlier age. I don't know if he waited to get on the finasteride or what, but regardless, it's pretty evident the finasteride is not sufficient for him to stave off his loss because he clearly knows what it is and it's not working. So in his case, he basically has to step things up a notch and or deal with it via some other means, hair transplants, hair systems, which there's nothing wrong with, to be honest. I think that anybody who cares about their self-image and, you know, really gets insecure about hair loss, if you're not willing to go like the drug pharmacology intervention route and or you have some sort of like adverse reactions to the only like pharmacological interventions that actually work for you, you know, hair transplants, hair systems, those are things that are absolutely, you know, worth looking into and might even be, you know, you could argue are better because down the line, it's like you're not going to be the one who's exposed to a cumulative effect of random chemicals your entire life, like people who are implementing like hardcore hair loss prevention regimens with tons of drugs in their system. So, you know, there's arguments for both sides, but either way, there are ways to deal with it one way or the other. And in Justin's case, if he wants to deal with it the pharmacologic route, the logical next steps, in my opinion, would be either look at your, well, first of all, a blood test would be warranted, of course, to see what his hormone profile is to begin with, how, you know, androgen dominant he is, how much, where's his SHBG at, where's his free relative to total DHT, how much is getting slashed down by finasteride, where's his total and free test, what's going on with estrogen levels and all estrogens in general. You know, there's a lot of things to take into account here that are ultimately going to dictate whether you have a androgen dominant, estrogen dominant, balanced, whatever it is, hormone profile. And in his case, like generally speaking, his next logical step would be either inhibiting more DHT via dutasteride or something like that, or implementing something to take care of androgen receptors as a whole, which would involve a topical anti-androgen, a topical selective androgen receptor modulator. There's other means of addressing it, but those are, you know, the typical like first step approaches would be something that either deals with androgen receptor activation or further inhibits DHT. And obviously, in my opinion, the ideal candidate would be something that actually takes the androgen receptor into account because it can actually deal with all androgens rather than just DHT. Because if you deal with just DHT, not only are you leaving all of the other androgens available to continue miniaturizing your hair follicles, but you are subsequently causing a spike in scalp testosterone when you further hinder 5-alpha reduction into DHT. So there's a lot to think about in this regard, but just in general, I'm sure he hasn't gone as far as he can to address this. And I'm sure, you know, I think most celebrities don't like go on the internet to research this stuff. So I'm sure he'll probably just end up with a hair transplant or something, and it'll probably look good. And I don't know, that's fine. But as far as like what I would do if I was him, it would be look into those pharmacological interventions and start evaluating the next step, because finasteride is clearly not working for him. So anyways, that comment did not age well for him, and I think most people, it's safer to assume you're probably prone, because anyone who seems to think, oh, I'm not hair loss prone, it's like no one's grandpa is a Norwood Dense Zero here. Like, let's be honest. Is your grandpa Ronald Reagan? I don't think so. Mine fucking wasn't. So he was, everybody who thinks their grandpa has perfect hair, most of them are talking about like a diffuse thinning like Norwood 4, and it's not actually good hair. So if you want actual like teenage, like good density, Norwood 0 to 1 hair like you're probably going to need to implement some sort of regimen at some point early on, in my opinion. That's just based on my own experience, because I waited too late and I had to play a lot of catch up, and I probably burned like 30K hairs off my head that I could have kept had I not addressed it sooner. And that is a big regret of mine, and part of the reason why I am here now making content about this stuff is to let you guys know that you're not going to notice your hair loss until 50% of it is gone. It's probably closer to like 25 to 30% realistically, but you have like 100,000 hair follicles on your head. If you pull one hair out, you don't even notice it's gone. You pull a handful of hairs out, you don't notice it's gone. It takes a lot of hairs that get miniaturized before you actually cosmetically visually see it in the mirror. So by the time it actually gets to the point where you can actually see a visual representation of hair loss, it's been progressing for years probably. You just haven't, noticed it because it's been such a progression. It's a slow burn for most people, and the miniaturization process is not overnight. If you wake up one day and you're under heavy downlighting, you can all of a sudden see your scalp and you couldn't before. It's the result of years of miniaturization. It's not like just a switch was flipped in one day. So again, though, there are, potentially like triggers for genetics and whatnot. That is obviously an area that is being studied too, but I think in general, it's not like somebody is getting acute telogen effluvium triggered overnight and somehow it's permanent. This is typically a slow burn over the course of a couple, at least like 5 to 10 plus years. For people who have really aggressive loss, it's, even in their teens, but for, most people, it's like 5-10 years, it starts to manifest and you can see it cosmetically. But at that point, you've already burned 25 to 30,000 hairs off your head and you just haven't visually seen it yet. So, but that's where the promise of, getting on top of this before it gets to that point is probably prudent and a good idea, in my opinion. So anyways, take from that what you will. If you want to learn more about the science of hair loss prevention and how to actually address it above and beyond the standard, here's your finasteride and minoxidil, then I highly advise you subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, check out my blog, moreplatesmoredates.com, for more elaborate and in-depth articles with table of content, subsections, clinical studies, and trials reference that I refer to in my videos, but you can't actually go click on and go do further research yourself because it's in a video rather than in the article. They're actually hyperlinked for you to go delve into it further yourself. So anyways, a lot of incentive to sign up for the mailing list too. The first link in the description below, because those articles will actually get sent to you right when they get published rather than you having to consistently check my site to see if it's been updated or not with new articles. So anyways, highly recommend you sign up for that. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.